There are two things that all MSK therapists have in common the world over. They love free trials and exercise prescription. So if you're a chiro, physio, osteo, or some sort of os-chiesio hybrid, then head to rehabmypatient.com/physio matters now and get 3 months on us of the best exercise prescription software available.
Katrina Lake, welcome to Chewing It Over. So scoliosis, you're going to be talking about that at Therapy Live, but that's just normal human variation of the spine, isn't it?
Not so much. So I think we've lived through an era where, particularly as physios, then we've been really put in a place where we've been taught there's not much that we can do about it. So it has become largely ignored. I think there's been a lot of reliance that it's just going to pass through the medical system, the GPs, the consultants, and people will handle it, and it doesn't require surgeries and it doesn't require anything. So people have really kind of glossed over that if people don't need surgeries, there's still a middle ground for how it can affect people. And I think the other challenge that's come with that, why I've ended up there, is that the bigger the curve, the more pain they're in. There's no like really obvious patterns towards having a larger curve and having more symptoms in life. You could have a smaller curve and have a bigger impact on your quality of life and function, a large curve and not even realize and be fairly functional. So I think because it doesn't fit nicely into boxes, then it can be quite hard for it to be well taught and well managed.
So if we try and give the devil its due for a bit and think about where that complacency's crept in, it probably is off the back of us becoming, maturing as a profession and as an industry at large in MSK, and thinking about the fact that we're not structuralists, we're not narrowly associating particular biomechanical variables with pain, either prognostically or as management. And so therefore it's become that doesn't matter, that at all, ever, in certain circumstances. The nuance has got lost. So if we think about that, where then do we go to think about when it does matter, without us getting carried away on a theme and feeling like we're regressing back to a very biomedical and biomechanical analysis?
For me, it's just helping people understand their bodies, that this is something that they are going to live with. Once it's become structural, there's no way that you're going to unwind that. So even with surgery, then there's going to be an element of change it has on their bodies, and it's them learning that the impacts it has on them. So for one person, they might get knee pain because of their scoliosis, because they have problems with their pelvis and pelvic torsion. It doesn't mean that everybody is. So it's very individual case analysis. And I think that's the other challenging thing is, again, I'm going to be controversial, I think we've been through physio training for a while where we want to be tick boxy. We want to be able to just follow a set protocol for everything. And with scoliosis, it's really not like that. For some people, you actually might have a lot of psychological influence going on. It could be a lot of how people feel about their body because of social media and imagery and how we're all taught we should look now. And that actually it could be that for some people that there's more self-confidence issues going on, and actually their physical issue, it isn't affecting them from a function and a pain point of view, but it does affect them psychosocially. So I think it's such a complex field to be working in that we can't narrow it down and put it into a nice protocol where you can just tick boxes and move everybody through and say, well, because you've got a curve of X degrees, it's going to affect you like this, and we therefore need to do this. Like every person has to be treated as an individual.
Of course, yeah, we've got to personalize care. I think that it's a really good point about aesthetics as well. We understandably, in some ways, will shy away from aesthetics in a lot of ways in MSK game. If someone comes in otherwise pain-free and it's a bodybuilder trying to particularize certain, those start to be of less interest than the musculoskeletal pain and injury game. But aesthetics for something like that, especially when it can be coupled with something like pes cavum and things, can't it, where they're going to have multiple surgeries based on certain spinal and other deformities, and that can compromise lung function, namely. So these things can be independent. It's not just pain, and especially in a world where we should be maturing past just how's your pain, then those factors, sometimes that bigger picture should be brought into it and considered, because why wouldn't self-confidence affect muscle tone and tension, which wouldn't ongoing affect function and pain? So it shouldn't be reduced. I can't help but ask, how did you get into it though? Like I don't know the answer to this question. It's not something we've talked about before off air. So how did you become a specialist in this area?
So I graduated in 2007, and then the job markets for physios was very different to how it is now, where we can't hire for love nor money anywhere. Unfortunately, we have a nice little team at our practice now, but obviously generally recruitment, everyone would say, is the biggest challenge with physios right now. Whereas I remember year one on my degree program, they sort of said, look, we're in a recruitment challenge. It's a good chance that half of you are never even going to be physios. Good luck. Enjoy the next 3 years of your degree.
I remember it well.
and start thinking ahead to what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think I'd gone into physio knowing I wanted to do MSK. I was already that person that had said, that's where I'll jump the respiratory and neuro hoops, but I want to be an MSK. And then through the degree, the NHS is a very vital job, but I didn't really find my niche within it that I went, yes, that's what I really want to go do post-grad. So I was quite happy to just apply for anything and everything. I was free to move around the country. So I literally just, as soon as I got to end the third year, applied for everything. And I ended up with a stroke rehab ward assistant offer. So I could have gone back to one of the wards I was a student, but taken a band 4 and gone in as unqualified and progressed through. Same at Addenbrooke's on elderly care, where I'd been a student. So I was offered a band 4, or I was offered a qualified position at a scoliosis rehab centre. And I'd gone and spent a whole day with them and just hung out and observed. And there were so many little things that they were doing. It was all group exercise rehab based. I was a gymnastics teacher, so I was very used to teaching group exercise. And just the work they were doing, just something kind of went, oh, that sounds really interesting. So I took a bit of a gamble on a very strange career move for a physio of going hyper niche straight after qualifying, which my family were not supportive of. They're very system. You go into the system and you go through the levels. But I don't know, there was just something there that hooked me in. So I went and did 2 years with them, just doing scoliosis rehab for the first 2 years. Then decided I did want to broaden a little bit. So I then went into generic private practice. I worked alongside a group of chiropractors who obviously are fascinated by scoliosis, and then maybe very strong on manual technique, but had no clue how to rehab them. So I then worked with them for 10 years. Still doing some scoliosis, but doing generic MSK as well before I opened my own practice 4 years ago now.
Brilliant. And I always think lake therapy, it sounds like a type of therapy as well. I always think I'd love to go for some lake therapy.
Lake therapy, I know.
Or go swimming or something, but yeah.
So when we found our premises, we had 2 children. My eldest was 3.5. My youngest was only 8 months old. And we just started going, well, let's look for premises, because rather than go back to employment after my second maternity, it's a good time to open up and be in our hometown. And then suddenly these premises opened up. They were available in a month, and we had a month to get a business together, have a business name, hire people, train a team, refurb premises with an 8-month-old and a 3.5-year-old. And the name, I was like scribbling down things and being like, they're all useless. I don't know. And we just went lake therapy.
Yeah, I like it.
There's no lake. Everyone's very disappointed.
No, I know, but that's one for the future. You've got like a resort spa type thing called lake therapy that's clearly in your future. So no, it's great. Now, we've described a little bit about the sort of caricature of, unfortunately, too true as a story whereby it's super complacent, super blasé, doesn't matter, never matters, therefore just treat as chronic mechanical low back pain, as if it's some sort of, which of course in some circumstances, in manic cases, it might be incidental, but it doesn't mean it's irrelevant even then. But then let's say that then if we get too carried away in the other direction, it can feel a bit regressive. So that would be by way of, say, never mind diagnostically for now, but let's just say manual techniques and very intricate corrective exercise on a segmental level is therefore going to correct said shifts and curves in such a way that feels naive at best and sort of profiteering at worst for some of the things that can be sort of sold in that direction when it's something that is implying preventative cases. So how do we make sure we don't overindulge that side of it? And where is it that the line is that what we can and can't achieve in these such cases?
It is tricky, because I think also the way that particularly children and teenagers are treated on the NHS can really drive them towards being really measurement focused.
Right.
So the system that a lot of children will go through is somebody, whoever it is, picks it up. They go to see their GP. They get referred through for an X-ray, and they pretty much just get given a number on an X-ray. So they're told you're 35 degrees. You've got a 35-degree cob angle. Nothing we can do at that stage. Come back in 6 months, re-X-ray in 6 months, you get given another number. And that can just be their life for 6 month increments as they're still growing. is everything about them becomes one number on an x-ray. And if it changes by 5 degrees, 10 degrees either way, then they can get really fixated on that and go, oh my God, I'm 5 degrees worse, which, you know, in their real life, does that mean anything? Not really, no. So we probably end up with more people patient-wise coming in who are in that mindset once they've been officially diagnosed that they are hyper alert to numbers and measurements, and that for me is really not helpful. As a physio, that's not how I practice. I'm about, is it affecting your life? Is it affecting everything you want to do with your body? Let's teach you that you're beautiful. You know, I even hate, I'll go back to what we said at the start with spinal deformities. I'm really trying to drive that we're not using that word, because for a teenager who's first diagnosed, that, you know, they get on Dr. Google, put in scoliosis, and the first thing they read back is, I've got a deformity, I'm deformed. So when we're looking at the psychological aspects of what we're doing to these children, if we're using that language with them, we're really feeding into a mechanism that's not helpful. So I think where we sit as physios is that if we can encourage people that they're beautiful, they're healthy, their bodies are still really capable, they can still do everything they want to do in life. And yes, they might have a curve, they need to be aware of it, they might need to manage it, they might need to understand how a different pain or symptom could creep in, so things like breathing that you mentioned earlier, and how they can work on their lung capacity and their breathing techniques. We're just in a really good position to enable them to live a really happy, healthy life and not think that their scoliosis defines them.
And how biomechanically specific might we be then when we've properly analysed things? This is Scroth method, I always mispronounce it, has been popularised to really try to tailor a fairly biomechanical intervention, but one that, you know, rationally makes sense as long as there is positive adaptation can be made at the right volume. And that's the thing that sort of skeptics, myself included at times, have applied in that direction, whereby it's that you're fighting against life forces itself, right? How much volume can we achieve in the right directionally specific way that would counter gravity? So that's the thing that where, again, I'm not expecting to get all the answers right now. I'm looking forward to your session at Therapy Live, and of course beyond, getting to know your work. But just, can you give me a bit in a nutshell as to you know, how much can we go in that direction without being naive?
Yeah, so the practice that I worked at originally was Schroth based. Again, they've now kind of spun off and
Schroth. I knew I'd finish.
I say Schroth, but I was teaching in the Netherlands a couple of weeks ago, and again they say it differently again. So we're all just saying it in different ways.
I knew I'd got it wrong. No, it's fine.
I say Schroth, whether it's right or not. That was how I was trained. Cool. It has its challenges. So most Schroth centres, there's only 1 or 2 in a country, so people have to travel quite a long way to go and have rehab there. They'll do 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, over 4 weeks, for example. And yes, they can get some great changes in that time period. There's then quite a heavy expectation on them having a full set of exercise gear at home, doing 30 to 45 minutes ongoing every day, rigidly on their exercises, holding their posture corrections really rigidly. That again, for a lot of people, just isn't then sustainable or necessarily a good thing to be doing long term. So what I've tried to do is find a very happy balance where I'll draw on some of those exercises and the knowledge, but I'll also combine it with some of my clinical Pilates work, with some manual therapy, with just general lifestyle advice, and find something that's just a bit more of a realistic, achievable program that isn't getting people to fixate on things.
Yeah, because I've seen some real obvious deleterious consequences to stuff like that, whereby they'd made some progress on a, say, structural and biomechanical level, even aesthetically they've been pleased, but they then braced and tense and actually much more symptomatic than they ever had been, because of that being quite a big change for them in behaviours, as well as them thinking that if they can just, you know, I remember a lass that said that if only when I fall asleep, I know I relax too much. And it was just this idea that then if only I could hold myself in this
position,
corset. She was tensing so much that she was in this corset that the act of sleeping and relaxing in her sleep was going to degrade her curves. And so that's obviously where it can go too far. And then the cure can be worse than the disease, even if it is technically effective on a structural level. So no, it's a great little point that you're making there about how it's got to be seen in its fullest in a holistic form to really know whether or not those interventions are either likely to be effective and sustainable, but also are worthwhile for that person based on the factors you're describing.
Exactly, and it's working very, very individually with that person in terms of things like their risk of progression. So if you've got a child or a teenager, they might need a bit more intensive support whilst they're growing because they're going to be changing rapidly. But we now know that once people reach skeletal maturity, as long as their curves below 30, 35 degrees, that's pretty much how they're going to be. So do they need to spend half an hour obsessively every day going through their regime of exercises and thinking about their posture, or can it be in a slightly more relaxed format that they can still enjoy their lives? As I don't want people to obsess about it. People say, like, what position should I watch TV and what position should I sleep in? You're like, stop. Like, you're a human. Can I still bounce on a trampoline, or is that going to hurt me? It's like, of course you can still bounce on a trampoline and go horse riding. So it's really us trying to strike that balance and say it's being very aware that we're not just going, this is biomechanically what's wrong, looking at their life impacts, their confidence, their psychosocial factors, their overall lifestyle, and making it appropriate to them and where they're at.
There's so many unknowns, aren't there? But we know that the upside, as we understand it, of social participation in varied, regular exercise and enjoying that and feeling confident and comfortable doing that. There's so much in that then you'd have to have really good evidence to support something that countered it. That's how I often see these things. It could well be that there's some changes that could be made, but to avoid what we've just described there, which is a good definition of an active life, it's just basically being well, then it'd need to be something that's really got a powerful evidence behind it. And that's where I sometimes feel it's lacking. Is not that it's not showing to be effective, but it needs to be stronger, and it needs to account for the fact that it can be not particularly practical. And I think that's one of the things that's interesting to try and tease out. I definitely wonder whether in such cases, it's the classic idea where our clinical experience and expertise, especially when you accumulate case series, etc., such as you've got, and that it gets tailored over time. It's so hard that each of those individuals, there's no control group. They've not got an identical twin that's just got that as one changeable variable. Admittedly, as someone that has got identical twins, you wouldn't have one of them having that disposition and not the other, and it'd be so. So you're then in a situation where the lack of that control group means that then if something is or isn't effective, or what would have been, there is no counterfactual to be able to verify those things. So everyone needs to have a bit more humility and to be seeing things in its fullest without over attributing to results. Also, not over attributing to, well, this is why it's deteriorated then, because we just don't know. And that's one of the things that the ability to get any of these patients, in my limited experience compared to yours, to just cut themselves some slack and to just try to make sure that they don't necessarily feel like it's because they've done something wrong or it's bad judgment. And a lot of this is unfortunate, but it's something that can be, let's do what we can, let's control what we can, and then trying to liberate these people's movement can make a huge difference, again, in my limited experience. And it sounds like from looking at your stuff and hearing you today, that's in keeping with your general philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's also being realistic about people's personal discipline. So again, the idea that you're going to have a teenager, let alone an adult, who's so self-disciplined that on their own with no accountability, they're going to do those exercises every day for the rest of their lives. That's the other challenge with this. I really do think it works, having worked in that centre. I think the big challenge is, yes, maybe some slight hyper obsession then from it, but also the lack of any sort of accountability and follow-up and just general support to help people longer term. And I know some of the centres now try and provide a little bit more of that remotely. But yeah, so to expect people to be so self-disciplined, there's not many of us that would tick that box.
Absolutely. And also it's that if we feel that there is if this was to overnight, this was to be better understood amongst therapists, amongst the medical system, and we were to be able to make the social adjustments to allow for something like that, then we know how, even in a life-limiting condition such as cystic fibrosis, that also requires a certain amount of management time, exercise, even manual techniques that do require another. The ways in which to make adjustment for the amount of sustained activity and regularity and discipline that you're describing is such that is a huge social task at a time of massive social breakdown in lots of ways. And we're not sensibly adjusting for people's long-term conditions, and we're struggling to get ahead of that. And so we can't proceed with that naivety. It all needs to be nested in pragmatism, which is why, again, we're increasingly looking forward to what you're talking about, as well as then pointing people in the direction of your work. In the spirit of that, can you tell us a little bit about what you've got in store for us at Therapy Live 24th of June, and then also a little bit more about what you then do for CPD for clinicians ongoing?
Sure. So Therapy Live, I'll be doing a half-hour version of my sort of overview of scoliosis. So what it is, how we define it, some of the problems that we can see associated with it, the different curve patterns that we can see and recognise. We'll touch a little bit on different risk progressions, like who is at risk of progression, who isn't. So that's one of the questions we often get from clients, is whether it's going to get worse. We'll do a little overview of what's generically available now, and then where we can really step forward as physios, sports therapists, osteopaths, to help fill the gap that's not being provided for people that need support. So I'm going to try and do half an hour. It usually takes me an hour, so I'm going to have to cut out a whole load of slides and go super fast. But that's what we'll do at Therapy Live. And then for people who are interested off the back of that, I now run a 2-day CPD course where we go into that in a lot more depth, learn how to do your own x-ray analysis, that you understand when surgeons are talking about cob angles and reassign, you know what they are, you can measure them yourselves, and how you can put together an appropriate rehab program for somebody, taking account of their curve patterns, their muscle imbalances, doing some breathing techniques. Good fun.
Superb. No, it sounds great. Really looking forward to it. Thanks again for joining us at Therapy Live. And today, it's been great to chat to you. Where do people find out more about you? What are those sort of social handles and how they can then get in touch?
Oh gosh, I'll be honest, I'm a bit useless on social media. You're very welcome to find me just at Katrina Lake. I'll just post links to my courses and general stuff on there. Otherwise, it's probably easiest just to drop me an email if you're interested in anything further. So Katrina, Katrina, at laketherapy.co.uk.
Fantastic. No, thank you so much. Looking forward to it, as I said. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you as the audience gets in touch with your stuff and starts to engage, because I think scoliosis is one of those areas where it really starts to open up the conversation again over the relevance and not of various different structural and biomechanical
it's
factors.
Controversial.
But yeah, it is controversial. But as long as we're not overindulging that somewhat regressive, narrow focus, and it's nested within that wider holistic picture, of which is why that trend has gone, then we stop the baby being thrown out with the bathwater and start to be more accurate and helping people with scoliosis in a more sensible and sane manner than sometimes those extremes can lead to. So thanks for your work. Looking forward to it on the 24th of June. For those that are listening in, if you haven't got your tickets yet, I mean, I think this will go out and you'll probably then only have a couple of days. They are going to sell out. We need to close it soon because we have to reserve some for our Physio Matters members. And so if this goes out in a couple of days' time, which I think it's intended to, then you are literally hours away from that getting closed on you. You get 3 months content access as well. So if you're worried about not being able to get it all in a day, then we know that, and we've accounted for it. 3 months access to the tickets. So do check out physiomatters.com/therapy live to get your tickets. Snap them up now. Visit Katrina's session as well as everyone else's at the Therapy Live, again, 24th of June. Thank you, and we'll speak to you soon.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Cheers.
Here at Physio Matters, we think physio matters. Join as a premium member now and access over 500 videos, get free tickets to shows and upgrades included. Access at home, work or on a unicycle to take your knowledge to the moon. physio-matters.com, more content than you can fit into a gym.